Alright, so imagine this. You come home from work one day, tired, hungry, already thinking about what you're going to cook for dinner, and sitting in your yard is a bright orange survey stake. Not near the edge, not even close, but deep inside your property, like someone just casually decided your land wasn't yours anymore. Yeah, that's exactly how this whole thing started for me. Now I live in a pretty normal suburban neighborhood. Nothing fancy, nothing gated, just your typical quiet place where people wave at each other but don't actually talk that much. And yeah, we have an HOA, but for years it was chill, like they'd send emails about trash cans or cracked sidewalks, and that was about it. No drama, no power trips, just background noise. And then we got a new board. Every neighborhood has that one shift where things go from laid back to who gave these people authority. And ours happened fast. The new president, let's call her Denise, mid-50s, always walking around with a clipboard like she's inspecting a crime scene. Within weeks, she had turned the whole vibe into something tense. You'd see her standing on sidewalks, writing notes about people's lawns, sending emails about community cohesion and aesthetic alignment. And I remember thinking, okay, this is new, but whatever. I keep my place clean, I'm not worried. Except I should have been. Because my property had something most others didn't. I had a corner lot, which meant I had this long strip of land running along the side of my house, about 10 feet wide, stretching almost the entire length of the block. And that strip? That was mine. I knew it, my realtor knew it, the county records knew it. When I bought the house, I checked everything. Deed, plat maps, boundaries. I'm not the kind of guy who just signs papers and hopes for the best. And over 5 years, I turned that strip into something I was honestly proud of. I built a stone path, by hand. Weekends, sweat, trial, and error. I added raised beds, grew vegetables, herbs, planted a Japanese maple that finally started looking like something out of a magazine. And at the far end, I planted a weeping cherry tree. Every spring it bloomed like a painting. It wasn't just landscaping, it was my reset button. Bad day at work? I'd go out there, pull weeds, water plants, just breathe. Neighbors would walk by, stop, compliment it. Older couples would slow down just to look. And yeah, I'll admit it, I was proud of that space. So when I saw two random guys in work gear, standing in the middle of it, rolling one of those measuring wheels like they were planning a highway, yeah, I had questions. I walked out, like, hey, can I help you? And they looked at me like I wasn't supposed to be there. One of them goes, oh, we're surveying common areas for a new HOA project. Common areas. I remember just blinking at him for a second, like, you're standing in my garden, next to my trees, and you're calling it common. I told them, politely, this is private property. They shrugged, literally shrugged, and said they were just following orders. And here's the thing, I didn't push it. I figured, okay, someone messed up, they'll fix it, no big deal. Yeah, that was mistake number one. Because about a week later, I'm getting ready for work. I look out my kitchen window, and there it is. That orange stake. Right next to my Japanese maple, like someone planted a flag. Not near the boundary, not even pretending to be accurate, just 10 feet inside my land. And something about that, man, it hit different. It wasn't confusion anymore, it felt deliberate. Like someone had walked onto my property, ignored everything I built, and said, yeah, we'll take this. So I took pictures, multiple angles, made sure everything was visible, and I sent a calm, professional email to the HOA, just asking for clarification. You know, like a reasonable person. And I really thought they'd apologize, explain, remove the stake. Instead, 2 days later, I get an email from Denise. And let me tell you, this woman didn't apologize, not even close. The email was long, full of that corporate HOA language, exciting new initiative, community green space, enhancing neighborhood synergy, like she was pitching a startup instead of explaining why there was a marker in my yard. And at the bottom, she attached a map. I open it, and I swear, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so ridiculous. It was a screenshot from Google Maps, with a red box drawn on it, like someone used MS Paint. And inside that red box, my entire garden, my path, my beds, my trees, all labeled as future common area. That's when it clicked. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. They had looked at my property, decided they liked it, and were trying to take it. And the craziest part? They were acting like it was already approved, already happening, like I just needed to step aside. A few days later, the HOA newsletter goes out to the whole neighborhood. Big headline, New Community Green Space Initiative. And guess what image they used? That same terrible map. Now it wasn't just between me and them. Now it was public. Now it looked like I was the guy standing in the way of something good for the community. And that was the moment I realized. This wasn't just about land anymore. This was pressure. This was strategy. And they were betting that I'd fold. Now let me pause the story for a second, because this right here, this is where things go from annoying HOA drama to something way more calculated. According to standard procedure, an HOA doesn't just wake up one morning and decide your private property is now a common area. That's not how any of this works. Boundaries are defined by recorded plat maps and your deed. Those are legal documents filed with the county, not something a board president can redraw with a red box on Google Maps. From a legal perspective, what they were trying to do falls into a gray area that can get them into serious trouble, because if they actually went forward, entered my land, removed my property, or built anything, they'd be looking at trespass, property damage, and potentially civil liability. And trust me, HOAs hate liability. But here's the part most people miss. This wasn't really about law at first. It was about psychology. This is a psychological trap. You start with confidence, big language, official tone, newsletters. You make it sound like the decision is already made. Then you apply social pressure. Put it in front of the whole neighborhood so the target feels isolated. And finally, you escalate with legal threats, deadlines, fines, certified letters. Most people, they panic somewhere in that process. They don't check documents. They don't push back. They comply, not because they're wrong, but because the system feels overwhelming. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly what Denise was counting on. But here's where she miscalculated. She assumed I hadn't done my homework when I bought the house. And more importantly, she assumed I'd react emotionally instead of strategically. And that right there, that's where the whole thing started to fall apart for her. So after that newsletter went out, I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I didn't fire off some angry email like they probably expected. I just waited. Because here's the thing. When someone is bluffing, the worst thing you can do is interrupt them. You let them talk. You let them commit. You let them dig the hole deeper. And oh, they did. About a week later, I get a notification, certified mail at the post office. Now, if you've ever gotten certified mail from an HOA, you already know it's never good news. So I drive over on my lunch break, sign for it, open it right there in the parking lot. And yeah, there it is. Notice to cure or quit. Which, if you don't speak HOA, basically means, fix this problem we invented, or else. The letter says I'm in violation of HOA rules for storing personal property. Personal property. They were talking about my garden, my stone path, my raised beds, my trees. Stuff I built over 5 years, suddenly labeled as if I parked a broken car on the lawn. And then comes the part that really made me sit back in my seat. 30 days. Remove everything within 30 days, or they would hire contractors to clear it themselves, bill me for it, and start charging me $100 per day in fines. I just sat there for a second, reading it again, slower this time. Because this wasn't just pressure anymore. This was escalation. They had gone from suggestion to public narrative to legal threat. And something in me just clicked. Not panic, not anger. Clarity. Because if they wanted to play this like it was official, then I was going to respond the same way, but correctly. So I didn't reply, didn't call, didn't even acknowledge it. Instead, I drove to the county records office. Now let me tell you, there is something incredibly satisfying about walking into a place where facts actually matter. No opinions, no community synergy, just documents. I told the clerk what I needed, certified copies of the original subdivision plat map, and my property deed. She printed everything, stamped it with that official county seal, handed it over like it was nothing. $50. $50 for what was basically the end of this entire situation. I get home, spread everything out on my dining table, and it's all right there. Clear as day. Property lines, measurements, boundaries. That entire 10-foot strip? Mine. Not even close to shared. Not even slightly ambiguous. There was no loophole, no gray area, no interpretation. Just ownership. So that night, I built my response. Not emotionally, strategically. I made copies of everything. Their letter, their newsletter, that ridiculous map, and then the real documents, the certified ones. And then I wrote them a letter. And this is where it gets fun, because I didn't accuse them of anything. I didn't threaten them. I didn't even say they were wrong. I played dumb. I wrote it like I was confused, like I genuinely wanted to understand. I thanked them for their notice, said I wanted to comply with all HOA rules. And then I dropped the one question. The question. I asked them to please provide the legally recorded documentation, the deed transfer, or the updated plat map that showed my property had been redesignated as common area. That's it. No attitude, no sarcasm, just documentation. Because here's the beauty of that move. If they had it, they'd send it. If they didn't, they were done. I printed the letter, attached all the exhibits, sent it certified mail, return receipt, full paper trail. And then I waited. No emails, no calls, nothing. A full week of silence. And the deadline they gave me? Getting closer every day. But I wasn't worried, not even a little. Because I knew something they didn't. Truth doesn't panic. And then one morning, I look out my kitchen window, and the orange steak is gone. Just gone. No explanation, no message, like it had never been there. And I just stood there for a second, smiling. Because that silence? That was the answer. A few days later, I get an email, not from Denise, but from the HOA treasurer. Short, rushed. Clerical error. Miscommunication. Project on hold. Disregard previous notice. No apology, no accountability, just damage control. And honestly, that told me everything I needed to know. But I wasn't done yet. Because the next HOA meeting was coming up. And for the first time ever, I decided to attend. I show up early, sit front row, folder in my lap. Not saying a word, just present. People start filing in, neighbors chatting, some of them clearly curious about this green space project. And then Denise walks in, sees me, sees the folder, and you could literally watch her confidence drop, like someone turned off a switch. The meeting starts, routine stuff, budgets, maintenance. And then someone in the back asks about the project. When does construction start? And oh man, that's when it happened. Denise clears her throat, avoids eye contact, and says the project is indefinitely postponed due to unforeseen surveying complications. Surveying complications. That's what we're calling it now. Another neighbor presses, what kind of complications? And she just stumbles, vague answers, no details. In the room, you could feel it shift. People weren't buying it. They could tell something was off. And I didn't say a word. Didn't need to. Sometimes the most powerful move is just showing up with the truth and letting someone else collapse under it. The meeting moved on, but the damage was done. Her credibility? Gone. And about a week later, I get one final letter from the HOA's attorney. Short, formal, very careful wording. They acknowledged the official property boundaries, retracted the notice, called it an administrative error. And just like that, it was over. Completely. No fines, no construction, no community space. Just my land exactly as it always was. And yeah, I read that letter a few times. Not gonna lie, I enjoyed that part. Because in the end, they didn't just back down. They put it in writing. And that's the kind of win you frame. So yeah, after all that, things went back to normal. Actually, better than normal. I finally bought that bench I'd been thinking about for years, solid cedar, nothing fancy, just something that felt permanent. I placed it right at the end of the path, under the cherry tree, and I remember sitting there that first morning, coffee in hand, just looking at everything. The stones I laid, the beds I built, the trees I planted. And for the first time in a while, it all felt protected. Not just physically, but legally. And that's really the part people don't talk about enough. Because the lesson here is, ownership isn't just about what you paid for, it's about what you can prove. A lot of people assume that if something feels wrong, it must be wrong. And yeah, sometimes that's true. But in situations like this, feelings don't win, documents do. From a legal perspective, what saved me wasn't confidence, or arguing, or even standing my ground emotionally. It was paper, certified, recorded, boring paper. And more importantly, knowing it existed before I needed it. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. If I hadn't checked my deed when I bought the house, if I didn't understand my boundaries, if I just trusted that they must know what they're doing, there's a real chance I would have lost that land. Not because they were right, but because they were louder, more official, more persistent. And that's how this kind of thing happens, not through force, but through pressure. This is a psychological trap, and it works more often than you think. You get official letters, deadlines, fines, and suddenly it feels like you're already in the wrong, like the system has already decided. So people comply, not because they agree, but because they're overwhelmed. And that's exactly what they were counting on. But here's the flip side. Once you understand how the system actually works, it becomes a lot less scary. According to standard procedure, HOAs have authority, but it's limited. They can enforce rules, maintain common areas, but they cannot just redefine ownership because it's convenient. That requires legal filings, county records, real documentation, not a newsletter, not a painted map, not a confident tone in an email. And I think that's the part that changed how I see things now. Because it's not about fighting harder. It's about asking better questions. The moment I stopped reacting and started asking for proof, the entire situation flipped. And honestly, that applies to a lot more than just HOAs. Anytime someone comes at you with authority, pressure, urgency, instead of pushing back emotionally, just pause and ask, show me where that's written. That one question, it cuts through a lot of nonsense real quick. Now as for Denise, she didn't run for re-election. No big announcement, no apology tour. She just disappeared from the board. And the new leadership? Way more careful, way more respectful. Funny how that works. But I'll leave you with this. Because I'm curious, seriously, if you were in my position, you get that letter, 30 days, threats of fines, people in your neighborhood already thinking the land isn't yours. Would you have fought it the same way? Or would you have just removed everything to avoid the stress? No judgment either way. Because honestly, I get why a lot of people would fold. That system is designed to make you feel small. But sometimes, all it takes is knowing exactly where you stand.